Hello and welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to AFSA's Inside Diplomacy series. These events are open to the public and they're intended to expand the conversation about the foreign policy and the Foreign Service. I would like to welcome AFSA's president and the host of today's program, Tom Yazgirdi. Tom?
Thanks very much, Nadja, and thanks to you and Hannah and the other AFSA staff that worked so hard to put this event together. And I want to welcome and thank you, all our participants, for joining us today for another edition of Inside Diplomacy. We're really excited to have joining us Ambassador Nina Hachigian, who is the first and only special representative for subnational diplomacy. We're very happy to have her here. Just a few words to kind of frame the debate a little bit, or today's event a little bit. So cities and state and local governments are increasingly more significant actors in international engagement. And that's especially true managing the effects of global challenges such as climate change and migration. What does this increasingly important dimension mean for our national foreign policy, and what has the U.S. government been doing about it? So to talk about this and more, we are so pleased again to have with us Ambassador Nina Hachigian, again, the first U.S. Special Representative for City and State Diplomacy at the Department of State. Before her current role, Ambassador Hachigian, who is no stranger to the department, was served as the first deputy mayor for international affairs for the city of Los Angeles. And prior to that, she served as the second U.S. ambassador to the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN. So I had the pleasure of meeting Ambassador Hachigian in Los Angeles a few months ago, where I was on an AFSA outreach visit, and then visited the Office of International Affairs at Los Angeles City Hall, which is usually the backdrop for movies that deal with City Hall. It looks like a City Hall. And that was an office that Ambassador Hachigian established. So again, we're so happy to have you here, Nina. Thank you for taking the time to share your insights with us and take our questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ambassador Hachigian for any introductory remarks you may have. Thank you.
Hi, Tom, and thank you so much for having me. This is lovely. Thank you to AFSA for all that you do. Hi, everybody. Thank you in the audience for spending some time. And yeah, let's just get into questions.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Nina. And so, yeah, let's get into it. We have some questions that we've prepared for Ambassador Hachigian, and then we will actually open up to the questions you sent in, and then we'll take some live questions. So the first question I had was, subnational diplomacy has been a somewhat popular term of late. For those in our audience who may not be too familiar with the term, could you please help us define it? Also, why does America need subnational diplomacy?
Yeah, a good place to start. I'm glad to hear it's a popular term of late. I still think it's very wonky and not very self-explanatory, but anyway, it refers to the official interactions of cities, states, counties, regions across international borders. So this could be a city-to-city connection. It could be a city-to-nation connection. It could be, state to region or state to nation. That state to nation is happening pretty frequently in the United States these days. So they may sign an MOU or decide to cooperate in some particular way, exchange delegations, host international events, et cetera. We can talk more about specific examples. In terms of why we need it, well, first of all, it's happening all the time. So that's important just to know as a fact. And the Truman Center is started to track specific interactions. And so that's a great place to look if you want to really see the breadth of it. So whether we need it or not, it is occurring. And even though my team is now, 2 years old, we still hear all the time from local elected leaders about stuff they're doing just on their own that we don't know about. And that's great. And it's fine with us. We don't, have any illusions that we could be aware of all of it. But we can talk later about why we, in terms of the State Department, can use it and why it makes sense for us to exist. But from the perspective of local leaders, they need and want to bring benefits back to their residents. And let me give you some examples. So the governor of Illinois has generated substantial investment in his state because of his very international perspective. He told me that dozens of international delegations, for example, were going to go to the Indy 500 race this year. The mayor of Phoenix traveled to Taiwan to seal a deal for a semiconductor fab coming to her city. 11 US cities are going to host the FIFA World Cup games that will bring in lots of tourists from all over the globe. So, jobs, trade, investment, that's always number one for most mayors and governors. But there are other reasons too, like finding solutions to, shared challenges. So the mayor of Hoboken, the city, it's near New York City and New Jersey, had terrible floods in, I think it was 2021. But I could be wrong, could be earlier than that. In any case, that mayor ended up with having a partnership with Netherlands because they have all kinds of technology that can deal with floods. So, and that kind of best practice sharing can be really magic when it's done well. A governor or mayor might want to make connections that are important to a big diaspora population that they have. So I remember the mayor of Allentown, Pennsylvania, telling me that people bring their places with them when they come. And so he went to visit the Dominican Republic to get a sense, a better understanding of this big part of his population. I know the mayor of Oklahoma City was thrilled when Mexico opened a consulate in his city. Then there's also cultural connections of all kinds, thousands of sister cities, student exchanges, musical events, and all of that enriches the life of everyday Americans. And then finally, I would say another reason to work internationally is because of values, so that you want to project the values of your city or of your state. I remember doing that when I was deputy mayor, when I went to a meeting of the U20, which is the big urban centers of the G20 countries. And that is just something else that we could talk about or think about, is the fact that lots of these local actors work in networks that are global, based on different issues. So that's why I think from the perspective of a local leader, you'd want it and want to do it. And we can talk later about why the State Department, why it makes sense for the State Department to have a function as well.
Thank you, Nina. This kind of fits into the next question. So you talked about sort of, things that we are all experiencing obviously at the subnational level, like the rise of mega cities and transnational challenges. Can you go into a little more detail about challenges like climate change and migration? How does subnational diplomacy sort of interact with those issues?
Yeah. Yes, I mean, you're right that we know the UN projects that by 2050, 2/3 of the world population will be urban. And so the welfare of people will be in the hands, in the first instance, of mayors and governors. And it's absolutely the case that cities, counties, states, regions are becoming the locus of many transnational challenges. Migration is one, because migrants end up in cities, extreme weather, pandemics, synthetic opioids like fentanyl, cyber attacks on local infrastructure. So local elected leaders are on the front lines of all of these very global challenges. And of course, the State Department and other parts of the US government are also working on those challenges. So it makes sense to kind of connect the dots and find synergies between the work at the national and local level.
That's great. It reminds me of my sister is a city councilwoman in Miami Beach, and she a number of years ago she led a delegation of the city council to Venice because beach erosion was such a problem in Miami Beach, and they thought they would see what the Venetians had been doing for centuries, trying to keep back the sea, and it was really useful in trying to
Exactly.
inform us on what to do. So thank you. Next question is, so subnational diplomacy, the unit and your position were established 2 years ago. What was the vision for it? How does it collaborate with other federal agencies like commerce and agriculture to avoid duplication and sort of maximize impact? And what has been accomplished, would you think, the main accomplishments in say the past 2 years?
Okay. It's funny, actually. I read an article written by a Spanish researcher on US subnational diplomacy, and it turns out that there was some kind of function in the 1970s. And then there was also a small office in H during Secretary Clinton's tenure. But this new incarnation is under the economic part of the State Department and a bit more robust, I would say. The team is small, but we've gotten a lot done. They're all amazing folks that I get to work with. And we've had a lot of enthusiasm from the leadership of the State Department that, has propelled us. The vision, I think, came from President Biden's objective of a foreign policy for the middle class. To be able to fulfill that, you have to reach out to places where Americans live. And in our 2 years, we've connected with over 5,500 elected leaders or staff in all states and territories. And so we've worked on two main goals: to help connect local leaders to the benefits of the department and of the U.S. Foreign policy, and also to help U.S. foreign policy. So example, in terms of what we've given and tried to share with mayors and governors and county officials and the like, is one of, and as I said earlier, one of their main priorities is economic. So, and they're all, interested in foreign direct investment. How can we get, a foreign company to set up, a manufacturing facility here, or a research facility or whatnot. So for the first time, I think in the U.S. government, we've been able to give local data for free at the city level. So it's been available for free at the state level, all along, and the Commerce Department, issues that, but we've been able to do it at the state level. And if you give somebody the data on what the current investment is in their city or county, then they will have a place to begin to retain what they currently have and to recruit new companies. So we've issued like 150 of those so far, something we started this year. We also let everybody know about the amazing student exchanges that the State Department runs. There's so many of them, but they are not known deeply in the country. And so that's something else that mayors really like. But the sort of bread and butter of our work, the everyday work, is answering their questions. And so we get pinged all the time by mayors, governors across the country on really a very wide variety of issues. So I remember the governor of Oklahoma calling because they had a constituent that was stuck in a foreign country and couldn't leave. We've briefed other governors in advance of their meeting heads of state. And we've answered a number of questions like, this person's writing to me with a Gmail account. Are they really from the embassy that they say they're from? That kind of thing. So that's how we help them, I think. In terms of how we help foreign policy, I would say there are 5 ways that the way I think about it, and I'll run through them quickly. First, local elected leaders help the State Department in terms of their expertise, their action, and their implementation in a range of areas. So we've talked about job creation. They're important actors in terms of climate because they make local level decisions that affect decarbonization, like procuring electric school buses, that are healthier for kids, but they also reduce carbon. Another example is that when we brief local leaders for engagements that they will have with China, which we refer to as the People's Republic of China, or PRC. We say that they have the option of raising or discussing what fentanyl is doing to their communities, to reinforce the message that we are also at the State Department giving them, and the White House is also giving them. Second, subnational diplomacy can help enhance bilateral ties. The practical kind of non-ideological conversations that local leaders have with each other are very, well received, and they could be sharing best practices, but also developing a relationship. The UK, Germany, and others have cultivated ties with states in the United States. DMR, one of the deputies of the State Department, led a group of 8 mayors and state officials to Armenia earlier this year, and that's generated a rich and ongoing conversation about the role of local leaders. The president of Armenia gave opening remarks at the forum that we had. We have upcoming trips as well that we are planning in the new year. One to Gabon, for example, which we hope will similarly strengthen kind of national and local ties. And in some countries, ties, are at the national level are frozen, and in some of those cases, subnational diplomacy is the most active, bilateral interaction that we have with elected officials. Third, the department engaging and having a capacity in subnational diplomacy focuses attention on the space that our competitors and our adversaries are exploiting in the US. So domestically, the PRC takes advantage of the fact that our political system is very decentralized to gain influence and to have its view of the relationship prevail when it's, when national level relationships are sticky. So with China House, we offer briefings for local leaders before they interact with their counterparts from the PRC to suggest ways for them to reduce risks in those interactions. And then local leaders in turn tell us about their experiences and what they're finding. We realize that many of the United States' allies have similar challenges at the local level. So we're going to be holding a symposium on strategic subnational diplomacy in January with some allied countries to train city, regional, and national officials on the skills to navigate that kind of foreign engagement at the local level, and encourage them as well to share best practices with each other on how they do that. Local action can also support multilateral diplomacy, such as the Summit of the Americas. So that's a summit that rotates every 3 years, and the United States was the host starting in 22. And we held for the first time a city summit. So it was the City Summit of the Americas. Had it in Denver, and we had hundreds of mayors joining and thousands of people. And I think that was the first time the State Department had ever hosted a cities summit. But it continues to pay dividends to us, and we're, hearing the ramifications of it. And actually later this week, we are going to be releasing a green city finance guide for cities in Latin America so they can implement the ideas they've come up with in a program called Cities Forward, where we paired US and Latin American cities to share best practices in sustainable development. Finally, the subnational diplomacy can introduce us to future national leaders earlier in their careers. So, for example, Secretary Blinken met the mayor of Mexico City at this Summit of the Americas, and she is now the president of Mexico. And also another mayor that was there, Carolina Cose, is the VP-elect of Uruguay. So just to give you a couple of examples. Oh, and in terms you asked about the interagency. So we work with every I mean, maybe there's one that we haven't worked with, but we seem to work with every agency and coordinate our programs and collaborate on many of them. So we work with Commerce regularly, with Department of Transportation that does work at the local level, and others. So we've just made it our business to make sure that we know what they're doing. The HUD is another one, the housing or urban development, yeah. So we try to be as collaborative as possible.
Thank you, Nina. I'd like to shift gears a little bit and just talk about sort of subnational diplomacy and the Foreign Service. So, in your view, is the Foreign Service workforce sort of positioned for work in subnational diplomacy? Maybe you can tell us a little about the new positions created for diplomats to work domestically in mayors' offices, states and governors' offices, counties, and other local governments. And it seems like subnational diplomacy jobs are a bit of a paradigm shift for the Foreign Service in that they are posted domestically in these offices. Why should we have diplomats posted around the U.S. and why would they want that? Why would they want this type of job? What do you think?
Yeah, in terms of whether we're well positioned, I mean, I think we're getting there. If I could, wave a magic wand and have the Foreign Service Institute do a course, on subnational diplomacy, I would of course say that they should do that, but everybody wants them to do a course on their thing. So, so I would say, it's a learned set of skills, but like every job, when you go to a new place, you have to learn a whole bunch of stuff about that new place. It's not unlike that to work subnationally. So I think in that sense, I think because our Foreign Service officers are used to bouncing around the world, working in different places in totally different contexts, they have that set of skills of how to, learn quickly on the job. So we've started the Lewis Local Diplomat Program, and let me just back up a second. So we are a big country, and yes, subnational diplomacy is happening, but it is a fraction of what it should be in my feeling, in my view, because there's so many benefits that we can get from it that we've discussed earlier. Compared to their counterparts in many other places, our mayors and governors are vastly under-resourced. They don't have expertise in their staffs. They don't have budgets. And compared to European cities, many Asian cities, many Latin American cities have much bigger staffs and budgets, and they therefore get the benefits of hosting big international events and bringing in tourists, or collaborating and cooperating on certain shared challenges. So what this program is trying to do is to fill that void. And for all the reasons that I said earlier, that subnational diplomacy helps the United States and the State Department, it makes sense to have some officers go out into the field, and it's a great training opportunity for them as well. And we do this, in conjunction with the folks in the State Department known as GTM, Global Talent Management, but the HR people, and they've been great partners in setting this up. It actually used to exist a long time ago, under the guise of the Pearson program, but that program is now all people who are detailed to Capitol Hill. Anyway, so what the receiving state or city get is, this very talented person with a lot of international expertise, so that they can finally start to figure out what they want to do internationally, what their strategic plan is, what their particular focus is going to be, and all that. And we've had pretty great enthusiasm from foreign and civil service officers about getting a chance to having a whole new unique experience, in the State Department, getting a chance to see the work, see the more or less immediate impact of their work, which is sometimes not something you see when you're working on, kind of the long-term relationship in the State Department, and being able to give back to their country more directly. Yeah, I think that's what they seem to want to get out of it. We have 3 in the field now, and by and large, I think they're having a great time. And to the degree that they're challenged, it seems like it's challenges that are, kind of opening their eyes to how, the fact that not everybody knows what the State Department is or what we do. But that's all good.
Great, thank you, Nina. So shifting to the incoming administration. So we all know the incoming administration promotes a more America First vision, assuming that it's going to carry into that vision into the White House. How would you pitch the work of your office to the new administration, number one? And there have been critics of some national diplomacy efforts to date, including that it is being implemented in a partisan way. That's fair or not, but how would you address that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I take extreme issue with the accusation that our work has been partisan. That is just not true. We have worked with really concerted diligence on engaging with local leaders of all parties, and we have done so. Because this is a Democratic administration, in fact, we go out of our way to work with Republicans and have a good track record of that work. In terms of the argument to keep it going, it's a tool, and mayors, county supervisors, governors, they want to know who to call when they need help. And to me, it doesn't really make sense to change how they do that. They're kind of used to it by now. And there will always be, they will always need our help of the State Department, and it makes sense to use the federal government to help them. And also we work on issues that both sides care about. So making local officials more resilient to PRC approaches, foreign direct investment, as I mentioned, fentanyl as a serious, example, cyber attacks, like these are very bipartisan issues. So the incoming administration may not make climate and democracy a focus, because those were the priorities of the Biden administration. And so what you need to look at is like, where is the intersection of what local officials want and what their authorities are and what the priorities of the new administration are. And I think, PRC, FDI, fentanyl, cyber attacks, I think those are all things that they would want to work on as well.
Great, thank you, Nina. Before we move on to the audience Q&A, I'm just curious, you'll be departing this role in the new year. What's next for you?
I do not know. We shall see. I have no plan except for to take some time off. But I've never had a plan before either, and I love my career. So I'll have plenty of time after January 20th to think it through. But I do love this field and hope to stay engaged with it.
Thank you, Nina. We wish you success. Okay, now we'll turn to the audience Q&A. AFSA staff is collecting and curating audience questions. And so I'll hand it back to Nadia to walk us through the questions that have been coming in from the audience during our conversation. Nadia?
Thank you both. What a great discussion. We've had a lot of questions come in. I will start us off with a question that I've seen come through several times, and it's expanding on your answer on how you're working with other agencies, in particular with commerce. So here's one of the questions, but I've seen a version of this come through a couple of times. I'm a foreign commercial service officer based in a domestic office outside of Washington. FCS, as it's called, strategically places foreign service officers and trade specialists throughout the US, where they promote trade and commercial diplomacy at the subnational level. How is your office interacting with them? And how can we work with the foreign service officers based out in the domestic field?
Yeah, well, I can say that we have encouraged all of our, the 3 local diplomats that are in the field now to find their local commercial service office and get to know them. And I think they have. So in San Antonio, Kansas City, and San Diego, I think they're probably latched up, or they will be shortly. And in general, we, when we're interacting with mayors and governors, we suggest that they talk to their local commerce office on issues that for example, I talked to the mayor of a small town in Texas who had a potential foreign investment coming in. And I said, talk to your local folks, because we don't know what the Texas rules are, and et cetera. So we work pretty regularly with them. We also work with the Select USA team in particular to encourage local leaders to go to that annual event. So we're very much in touch with them, and we're very happy that you're out there.
Great. Here's another question that's come up in a couple different versions, but given, I guess, that there are a number of folks working in this field, how do we avoid, or do we, I guess, run the risk of fragmentation or duplication of efforts? And how do we avoid that?
I mean, we coordinate with them. Like, we're not duplicating efforts to the degree that I know. We, the fact that we are offering like, FDI at the city level, we only did that after we found out that Commerce isn't doing that, right? So I talked to the leadership of Commerce, my staff talked to other folks in Commerce, and we did not see that this was happening. And so we've filled that gap. But we don't, beyond that, we don't do like FDI, like attraction with mayors and governors, like we do like maybe one-off events, where we invite a whole bunch. Like, we had an event where we invited ambassadors and the National League of Cities to meet together to discuss potential economic ties. So we do it on the kind of with the foreign ambassadors, but we're mostly just providing this data, and then hoping if the mayor or governor wants to act on it, then they should talk to Congress about what to do.
Okay, moving on. A couple of questions have come in about sister cities. And one question goes like this: I am interested in how the State Department works with sister cities and sister state programs. How can the department facilitate connections to these programs, or are there any grant funds available to these programs?
Yeah, so the Sister Cities program is handled by a different part of the State Department. It's called ECA, Economic, Cultural, I don't know what the A stands for, actually, arts maybe. There's somebody there who works on sister cities. There's also a nonprofit organization called Sister Cities International. They also are promoting and helping sister cities get created. When folks ask us, we give them, we either refer them to the other people in the State Department. We may give some of our own ideas if we happen to know, a city that seems like it would be a perfect fit. As far as I know, there are not funds available. I know that that's a challenge for some sister city organizations, but they tend to fundraise in their own communities to promote these.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The next question is that the U.S., as you mentioned, is vast. And has distinct geographical regions. How does the geography of the various regions influence the diplomacy?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, you're right that like every state, every governor, every mayor has their own set of priorities. We've tended to work on the ones that are shared, like creating jobs, or solving a problem, like a big problem of flooding or whatever that the city is encountering, that can, where there can be learnings from elsewhere, or student exchanges. Like, those are kind of the common denominators. And then of course there are states where, agriculture is the big, the big industry and source of exports, and they have a different, maybe set of priorities in terms of what countries they're going to engage with, than, a place that is doing car manufacturing or semiconductor, like trying to build fabs, like they're. So the diplomacy might change because of the countries that you'd want to connect with. But because we're a small team, and we tend to just try to work on things that many local leaders would benefit many local leaders.
Okay. So then switching gears a little bit to becoming engaged in subnational diplomacy efforts. So we have a couple of questions. One is for college students or recent graduates, how would you recommend getting involved in foreign affairs at the state level? And then we also have a question about how to engage local retired diplomats in these initiatives as well.
Yes. So the first question, I would say that an internship, and many of them are paid in cities or states, would be a good place to start. My office always wants interns as well. That's another good place to start. And there are several, internship programs that the State Department runs that you can apply to, and then, specify that you want to do subnational diplomacy. But it's good to just get a sense, even if you're not doing international specifically in a mayor or governor or county supervisor's office, just getting a sense of the way these places operate, which is very different from the federal government, is really good knowledge, and will set you up later to move into subnational diplomacy. Interesting that you talk about retired Foreign Service officers, because I have many times had that thought. We just have not had the bandwidth to really capitalize on it yet, except for just here or there where, we know a foreign, a retired ambassador is living in a certain place, and we just talk to that mayor, and so we connect them to have an unofficial relationship. But I think there's a lot of potential there. I would encourage you, if you're a retired Foreign Service officer, to make a contact. And if you are interested, you can always email our office, and our email is subnational@state.gov. And we can, potentially put you in touch.
Okay, great. Thank you. Switching slightly the gears, just as national governments cannot solve our complex challenges alone, local governments, as we know, are also partnering with all kinds of organizations. And the question is your office also engaging with these other subnational actors, such as universities and civil society organizations?
Yeah, we do. Like when we go to visit a certain place, we do definitely engage with civil society and with universities, and community colleges, et cetera, in that place. Again, there are other parts of the State Department that are more directly engaging with civil society and with universities. So I guess I would say yes and no. We engage a lot with organizations that particularly work with local leaders, so that's they often, as I said earlier, work in networks. So, for example, the Strong City Network works on polarization and violence, from hate, and there are other, like there's an organization that works on gender equity for cities. There are a few that work on climate. And so we work with all of those organizations, as well as the big ones that are not subject matter specific, but they are membership organizations for local elected leaders in the United States. So the National Governors Association, or the Association of Counties, or the National League of Cities, as I said, or the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Like, we work with those organizations a lot as well.
Okay, great. I should say we're having a lot of questions coming in, which is fantastic, and I will try to get through as many of them. So forgive me if we're jumping around just a little bit. But here's an interesting question about I think you actually started addressing this, but does the State Department sort of proactively use this tool of subnational diplomacy, or are you reacting to what is already happening on the ground beyond, I guess, the guidance of the State Department?
Yeah. Well, we don't act beyond the guidance of the State Department, but we do both. So, for example, with our briefings on the PRC, like we do some proactive briefings with, with the groups that I was just talking about, like of their members. Um, just so we're really just giving information about our relationship and about, some tips, as I said, about de-risking. We never tell anybody what to do, to be clear. They get to decide what they're going to do, but we want to be there to provide information. And like the City Summit of the Americas, like that was a very proactive thing that we did. There weren't others, like we just did that as the United States being the host of the Summit of the Americas. So I would say it's both, but then we're also very reactive to all the questions that come into us, on various topics.
So related to that, there's a question about how many requests does your office handle annually, would you say, from both, I guess, for support from domestic entities and maybe from foreign governments as well?
Gosh, I don't know. We have that statistic, but I don't know it off the top of my head. I know that the total engagements we've had are like 5,500 roughly in 2 years. But I don't know what percentage of those are, we're answering a question that has come in. It seems to be like, daily or, maybe 5 a week or something like that. But it also varies, depending on what's going on in the world. So at the outbreak, for example, of October 7th and Israel's response, like we had a lot of questions, both because people were worried about their constituents and because they were wanting more information about what was going on. And so just to give you an example like that we had many more at that time. So it waxes and wanes, but we have also just a steady amount that come in on trade missions or consular issues or delegations that are visiting, et cetera.
Okay. So obviously you don't have a magic wand to sort of see things in the future, to make things the way you want them to be. But how would you like to see this field of city and state diplomacy grow in the next 5 years?
Well, I'd really like to see it grow. But as I said earlier, the big challenge with that is just the resources at the local level. Like, so to give you an example, France has tens of millions of dollars available to cities and provinces they can bid on to do projects, internationally, especially development related projects. So best practice sharing on whatever it might be, clean water or et cetera. So I don't know. I don't think we're going to be that. I don't think that kind of resource will be available to our local governments. And so, part of what I think we've been able to do is explain why it's important, because the other barrier, other than resources, is mayors and governors being concerned that they will be criticized for going overseas. And I've been on these overseas missions. They are not relaxing. They are, meetings from morning to night, trying to bring things back to your place. But, opponents will always use that as the mayor's off on another vacation to wherever. So they are concerned about the political backlash. And I think what we've been able to do is, to a small degree, maybe, is to say, like, this is part of their job, and this is why it's part of their job. So that I think I want that stigma to also go away, because In other countries, yes, everyone has to do their job for their people and has to make sure the trash is getting collected and the potholes are being fixed. But you can learn about trash collection from another city that's maybe doing it a lot better than you are and more efficiently. So there's less stigma around it, I think, elsewhere. Really, the United States, in some ways, is really at the beginning of this journey. And other countries are farther along. Like I was told by a Chinese diplomat that the city of Shanghai, for example, has 100 people that only do international relations. And I know that at one point someone, I was talking to someone from Buenos Aires who said that they have like 18 people who do international relations. Our cities, other than the really big ones, have, 1 or 0 people. And the states similarly don't have, a ton of international expertise. So, we're at the beginning. I just want to see it continue to grow.
If I could pick up on some last point you said. So when visitors come to the United States, I think they're struck by how decentralized we really are, how much power the states have, how much power the cities have. And yet we don't have, you say we're at the beginning of, sort of subnational diplomacy. We haven't really devoted any resources to it. It seems to me it's kind of a disconnect. Why is it like that, do you suppose? We're so decentralized. You think there'd be more sort of emphasis on that, and yet there's not.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a big question, and I think if I'm guessing the roots go far, far back. It's the national government that does foreign policy, right? So you might think, oh, then there's nothing for cities and states to do, which is obviously, as we've been discussing, not true. And as transnational threats grow, the case for them to be knowledgeable and involved also grows. So. I can't give you like a real explanation for that. I will say in general, we don't resource local governments the way other places do. I mean, I I was in a state on the Eastern Seaboard, which I will not specify because it's so ridiculous. And the biggest city, a city of over 700,000 people, the mayor makes $20,000 a year. So has to have a whole nother job. So, if the mayor's not even getting paid like a living wage, of course they're not going to, also be able to have international experts on their team. So it's really an issue beyond just the international piece of it.
Question from someone who works in the nonprofit sector. How can those of us in the nonprofit sector continue this work of building constituencies for public diplomacy and subnational diplomacy?
I always think that when you don't have a lot of resources, that the way to get over that challenge is by, building teams. So I think that whether at the state level, county level, city level, like building a council or just an informal team of folks who are interested in this work. And so you might have someone from the World Trade Center and then someone from, a nonprofit, someone from a sister city organization, someone from a university, someone from, a particular company that has a lot of overseas, business, or the Chamber of Commerce, and having them all work together to, to figure out priorities and to push them forward, that is a good way to work.
What is the best way for small or rural municipalities or counties to take advantage of these subnational initiatives?
Email us, subnational@state.gov. And, you have to, the first part is thinking about what you want. And then, we can help strategize about how to get there. So I guess that's what I would say. But if you have, export markets you want to explore, absolutely talk to your local commerce office. If you're looking for, investment of some kind, again, commerce officer, talk to us if you want the data. It just sort of depends on what you're looking for. There's also sister county relationships. If you want to be connected to a county with similar, like a similarly rural county in another country to exchange ideas, people, etc. That's another option.
Okay. So I think this will be our last question. Maybe we can sneak one more in, but this question asks if you could talk a little bit more about the future of foreign policy for the middle class. Who is going to, or who do you think is going to be able to continue championing it from both inside and outside of the federal government?
It's a good question. I think, there are like all the political appointees of this administration will be going, will be leaving, and they'll be going to universities and businesses and think tanks and, nonprofits, et cetera. And, so they will probably, I would imagine, continue to speak out for this as a concept. In general, the federal government is working for the people. And, we just, I think, put more fine point on it than has been done in the past. But there's no question that like domestic and international policy is, they are very interlinked in a way that they haven't been before. And there's nothing that can change that, really.
Okay, and I do have one last question. It's another two-parter. And I think part one, what have been some of the surprises or maybe the biggest surprise in your tenure? And two, what does success look like in this space?
Yeah. In terms of surprises, I think I did not expect the level of interest by mayors and governors, honestly. I'm from Los Angeles, it's a very global city, and I just figured, that's why there was interest here. No, everyone's interested. Not everyone. Many, many, many more than I thought. Mayors and governors are really interested in serving their residents through international engagement. So that's probably the biggest surprise. And in terms of what success looks like, it looks like just more, subnational diplomatic action by U.S. cities and counties and states for all the reasons that we've talked about, because of all the ways it can benefit those places. And so it's really, yeah, that would be, I think I would use as the measure, is just how much activity is there.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks to the audience for those many questions. I hope we were able to answer most of them. Tom, I'm going to hand it back to you for any final remarks.
No, just to say thank you, Ambassador Hachigian, so much for participating and kind of enlightening us on the work you've been doing for the past 2 years and what has motivated you to do that work. We really appreciate it. And I invite you to, if you have any closing thoughts at all, I invite you to the floor if you wish.
Well, you've asked great questions. Thank you, audience. Thank you for being here. Thanks for listening, and thank you so much for all your thoughtfulness. And thank you, of course, AFSA and Tom and your team for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks very much, Nina. Okay, back to you, Nadia, for some reminders, please.
Thank you. So again, big thanks all around. Ambassador Hachigian, it's always a pleasure. Thank you, audience, for those fantastic questions and for being so interested and engaged on this topic. If you are not an AFSA member and you'd like to keep coming to events like this, please email us at events@afsa.org. We'll drop that in the chat box. And then, of course, please don't forget to follow us on social media. And until next time, thanks, everyone.